Okay, so have you ever noticed this? Like when you need to make a decision and then suddenly your brain just like, it kind of feels like it just shuts down.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I just get stuck, just going back and forth with myself.
Absolutely. Totally.
And it doesn't even matter if it's like a big life choice.
Yeah.
Like, should I take this new job or something really small? Like, what am I going to have for dinner tonight?
Yeah.
It could be anything. Right. And it's like this analysis paralysis takes over.
Sure.
So that's what we're going to like really get into today. How to kind of break through that mental clutter when you're trying to make decisions and come out on the other side like, confident and ready to move forward.
And feeling good about it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not like you just, wrestled a bear for 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Not like you just, spend 3 hours staring at the menu.
Yeah, totally.
So we're calling this a deep dive. We've done a lot of research for this episode.
Yes.
Looked at a ton of different sources, articles, books, and what we want to do is like really understand like why this happens.
Yeah.
Why do we overthink decisions? And maybe even more importantly, like how can we get better at it?
Right.
How can we decide more effectively and actually enjoy the process a little bit,
Absolutely. And what's so interesting is that the research has revealed some really practical stuff.
Yeah.
It's not all just theory. We're going to get into some actionable things that you can actually start using right away.
Cool. Yeah. I love that. Like a toolkit.
Exactly.
A decision-making toolkit that we can all put to use.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay. So let's jump in. Let's start with why do we overthink decisions in the first place?
Right. So one of the biggest culprits that kept popping up in the research is this fear of messing up.
Yeah.
The fear of making the wrong choice and then everything just kind of spiraling out of control.
Right. It's like this fear of like, what if I choose the wrong career path, or what if I buy the wrong, pair of shoes or something?
Oh, yeah. Or like, what if I move to this city and then I hate it?
Exactly. It's like this fear of regret, I think, is a big part of it.
Huge. Yeah.
And I feel like that's also kind of tied to this, like this idea of perfectionism.
Oh, yeah.
Like we want to make the perfect decision that leads to the perfect outcome.
Right. Like we're searching for that guaranteed happy ending.
Yeah, exactly.
And we think if we just analyze everything enough, we'll somehow magically find it.
Right. But the problem is like perfect doesn't really exist, right?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting because that pursuit of perfection that you mentioned, it often leads to just complete inaction.
Oh, yeah.
We get so caught up in trying to like map out every possible scenario and eliminate every potential risk that we end up just completely frozen,
I think we've all been there at some point.
Totally. It's like that classic deer in the headlights,
right?
Just overwhelmed by all the possibilities.
Yeah. And I think it also doesn't help that we're living in a world where we're constantly bombarded with choices.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes. The tyranny of choice, right?
Yeah. It's like every decision we make, there's like a million different options.
Like even just going to the grocery store can feel completely overwhelming.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it.
It's like, do I want the organic almond milk or the soy milk or the cashew milk?
Oh my God. And then you're standing there for like 20 minutes just staring at the milk aisle.
Exactly. And then you start comparing prices and reading labels and it's like...
And then the whole decision fatigue thing sets in.
Exactly. So it's not just this internal pressure to make the right choice, but there's also all this external pressure from, all the options that we're constantly presented with.
Right. And it's like this fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Like, what if I choose the wrong option and I miss out on something better?
Totally. And then there's also the social pressure, too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, what will other people think of my decision?
Yeah, will they approve or will they judge me?
Will they think I'm weird for choosing this?
Right. It's like we're constantly trying to anticipate how other people are going to react to our choices. And that just adds another layer of complexity to the whole decision-making process.
Oh, absolutely. It can be really tough to tune out that external noise.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like this perfect storm of fear, of regret, perfectionism, too many options, social pressure.
Right.
It's no wonder that we overthink things so much.
It's like we're setting ourselves up to overthink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we look at this from like a kind of a more like a biological perspective, like our brains are wired to avoid risk, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like a primal instinct that's kept us alive for millennia. But in today's world, like that same instinct that kept us safe from like, saber-toothed tigers
right.
can sometimes lead us to overthink
Yeah.
even the simplest decisions.
It's like our brains haven't quite caught up to the fact that most of the choices we face now aren't actually life or death situations.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, our brains are still stuck in like fight or flight mode, even when we're just trying to decide, what to order for lunch.
Yeah, totally.
So there's that kind of biological component as well that kind of feeds into this whole overthinking cycle.
For sure. And one thing that I've found really interesting in the research is this idea that not making a decision is actually still a decision in itself.
Yeah.
And it's usually not a good one.
Right. It's like we think that by not deciding, we're somehow avoiding the problem. But really, we're just prolonging it and often making things worse.
Absolutely. Like, it's not a neutral holding pattern.
Yeah.
It actually comes with its own set of consequences.
Yeah. And one of the biggest consequences, I think, is increased stress and anxiety.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like when we're constantly agonizing over a decision and not taking any action, it just creates this constant low-level hum of anxiety.
Totally. And it can really start to weigh on you. Yeah, it's like carrying around this heavy backpack of indecision, and it's just draining your energy and preventing you from moving forward.
Absolutely. So even though it feels like we're protecting ourselves by delaying a decision, avoiding that potential risk, we're actually just adding to the stress that we're already feeling.
Yeah. It's like this vicious cycle of overthinking and indecision and anxiety.
Exactly. And it can be really tough to break free from it once you're caught in that loop.
So, okay, we've talked about why we overthink. We've talked about the consequences of indecision.
Right.
Now let's get to the good stuff. Like, how do we actually start making better decisions faster and with more confidence?
All right. So one of the most helpful concepts that came up in the research is the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule.
The 80-20 rule?
Yeah. You familiar with that one?
I've heard of it. Yeah. Like the idea that 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort.
Exactly.
But how does that apply to decision making?
Well, it's all about focusing on the essential few instead of getting bogged down in the trivial many.
Okay.
So instead of spending hours analyzing every single detail and trying to optimize every little thing, the 80-20 rule encourages you to identify the 20% of factors that will actually have the biggest impact on your decision.
So it's about like figuring out what really matters.
Exactly. Like what are the one or two things that are going to make the biggest difference in the outcome?
Okay.
And then focusing your energy on those instead of getting lost in the weeds of all the smaller details.
I'm starting to see how this could be really useful. Like it's about kind of like simplifying the decision-making process.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about cutting through the noise and focusing on the signal.
So, for example, like if I'm trying to decide between two different job offers, instead of agonizing over every single aspect of each job,
right,
I can use the 80-20 rule to identify the 2 or 3 things that are most important to me.
Exactly.
Like, salary, work-life balance, company culture, and then just focus on those key factors when making my decision.
Yeah, and that way you're not getting lost in the minutia of like, the free snacks or the office decor.
Right, exactly. It's about identifying the things that will truly make me happy and fulfilled in the long run.
Exactly. And it's also about reframing what a good decision looks like.
How so?
Well, instead of chasing this elusive idea of the perfect decision, which, as we talked about, doesn't really exist, a good decision becomes one that moves you closer to your goals, even if it's not perfect.
So it's more about making progress than achieving perfection.
Precisely. It's about taking action and moving forward instead of getting stuck in analysis paralysis.
Okay. I like that progress over perfection.
Yeah. It's a much more liberating way to approach decision making.
For sure. So besides this 80-20 rule, are there any other tips for making decisions more quickly and effectively?
Oh, absolutely. The research is full of practical strategies.
Okay, cool. Lay 'em on me.
All right. So one of the simplest but most effective strategies is to set a time limit for yourself.
A time limit?
Yeah, like a deadline. I think it sounds kind of basic, but it can be really helpful.
How so?
Well, think about it. When you have a deadline looming, your mind tends to sharpen its focus, right? It forces you to prioritize and make a decision.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you're faced with a decision, give yourself a specific time frame to make it. Yeah. It could be 10 minutes, an hour a day, whatever makes sense for the scope of the decision.
Right.
But having that constraint can really help you cut through the overthinking and just get it done.
That's like that Parkinson's law thing. Right.
Exactly.
Work expands to fill the time allotted.
Exactly. So if you give yourself unlimited time, you'll probably spend way too much time overthinking.
Right. Makes sense.
But if you set a time limit, you're forced to be more decisive.
Okay. I like that. What else?
Another really helpful tip is to limit your options.
Limit my options.
Yeah, we talked earlier about how having too many choices can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So one way to combat that is to actively reduce the number of options you're considering. So instead of trying to choose from a list of 10 different possibilities, narrow it down to just 2 or 3.
So it's like kind of like creating a short list.
Exactly, yeah. It's like curating your options.
Okay.
And that way you can focus your energy on comparing those few options without getting lost in the sea of possibilities.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for like everyday decisions, you know, where it's easy to get bogged down in the details.
Totally, like choosing what to wear, or what to eat, or what to watch on Netflix.
Exactly.
All those decisions can add up and drain your mental energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got time limits. We've got limiting options. What's next?
All right. This one might sound a little bit woo-woo, but trust me, it's backed by science.
Okay.
Learn to trust your gut, feeling your intuition.
Intuition.
Yeah, that inner voice that sometimes tells you what to do.
Okay, but isn't that like kind of unreliable?
Well, not necessarily. Your intuition is actually based on a lot more than just a hunch. Yeah, it's actually your subconscious mind processing all of your past experiences, your knowledge, your observations.
Okay.
And it's often picking up on subtle cues and patterns that your conscious mind might not even be aware of.
So it's like my subconscious is doing all this work behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And then sending me these like gut feelings as signals.
Yeah, exactly. And while it might not feel like a logical process, it can actually be a really valuable source of information.
And so it's not just about like going with my first impulse.
Right. It's more about paying attention to those subtle feelings and trying to understand what they're telling you.
Okay, I can see how that could be helpful, especially in situations where you don't have a lot of time or information.
Yeah, for sure. Your intuition can be a great guide in those situations.
Okay, cool. What else you got?
All right, here's another tool that can help you make better decisions faster. It's called the 10-10-10 rule.
The 10-10-10 rule.
Oh.
I like the sound of this.
Yeah, it's a really simple but powerful technique.
How does it work?
So when you're facing a decision, you ask yourself 3 questions.
Right.
How will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes?
Okay.
How will I feel about it in 10 months?
10 months.
And how will I feel about it in 10 years?
Wow. Okay, so it's about considering the long-term impact of your decision.
Exactly. Helps you zoom out and see the bigger picture.
Because sometimes what feels like a huge deal in the moment might not even matter a few months or years down the road.
Exactly. And vice versa. Something that seems insignificant now could have major consequences later on.
Right.
So the 10-10-10 rule helps you weigh those different time frames and make a decision that aligns with your long-term goals and values.
That's a great tool. I'm definitely going to try that one.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Okay. So we've got time limits, limiting options, trusting your gut, the 10-10-10 rule. What else?
All right, the last tip is all about what happens after you've made a decision.
Okay.
It's called decide and then detach.
Decide and detach. Yeah. Okay. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. It basically means that once you've made a decision,
you need to let go of the need to control the outcome.
So it's about accepting that you can't predict the future.
Exactly. You can't control everything.
Right.
So once you've made the best decision you can with the information you have at the time, you just need to trust the process and move forward.
So it's about like releasing that anxiety and worry about whether or not you made the right choice.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus from worrying about what might happen to actually taking action and seeing what happens.
Okay. I like that it's kind of like a surrender.
In a way, yeah. It's about surrendering to the fact that you can't control everything.
Right.
But you can control how you respond to what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's also about trusting yourself.
Okay.
Trusting that you made the best decision you could with the information you had.
And that even if it doesn't turn out perfectly, you'll be able to handle it.
Exactly. You're more resilient than you think.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We've talked about the reasons why we overthink the consequences of indecision.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of practical tips for making better decisions faster.
Right.
But there's one thing that I think is still kind of lingering in the air.
Okay, what's that?
This idea of perfection.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of us still crave that perfect decision.
Oh, yeah.
The one with absolutely no downsides.
For sure.
But the reality is that perfection doesn't exist.
It doesn't. It's a myth.
Right. And the research is really clear on this. Waiting for that perfect decision, the one with 100% certainty, it's a recipe for staying stuck.
It is. It's like waiting for all the traffic lights to turn green before you start driving.
Exactly. You'll never get anywhere.
You'll just be sitting there idling.
And meanwhile, life is passing you by.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting is that the people who tend to be most successful in life aren't the ones who make perfect decisions all the time.
They're not.
No, they're the ones who are willing to make decisions even with incomplete information. And then they learn and adapt as they go.
So it's more about like embracing the uncertainty.
Exactly. It's about being comfortable with not knowing everything.
And being okay with making mistakes.
Yes, mistakes are inevitable.
For sure.
But they're also valuable learning opportunities.
Right. It's like that saying, fail fast, fail often.
Exactly. The more you fail, the more you learn.
Yeah, and the more you learn, the better your decisions will become.
Precisely.
So it's like this iterative process of making decisions, taking action, learning from the results, and then making better decisions next time.
Exactly. It's a continuous cycle of growth.
I love that too. So instead of striving for perfection, we should be striving for progress.
Absolutely, progress over perfection.
And that's what ultimately leads to confidence.
It does, because the more decisions you make,
the
more confident you become in your ability to make them.
It's like building a muscle.
Exactly. Yeah, the decision-making muscle.
I like that. Okay, so let's kind of wrap things up here. What are the key takeaways that we want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
All right, so the most important thing to remember is that overthinking is not your friend. It's what keeps you stuck. It's what prevents you from taking action and moving forward.
Right.
So instead of overthinking, we want you to start using those practical tools that we talked about, like the 80-20 rule, the 10-10-10 rule setting, time limits, limiting options.
Trusting your gut.
Trusting your gut, detaching from the outcome.
All those good things.
All those good things.
So it's about being decisive and taking action.
Yeah.
Even if it's a little bit scary.
Because the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Exactly. And the more confident you'll become.
For sure.
Awesome. Okay, so here's a little challenge for our listeners.
Okay.
Think about one decision that you've been putting off, something that's been kind of nagging at you in the back of your mind. And this week, we want you to make that decision.
Yeah, just go for it.
Use the tools that we've talked about.
Set a timer limit, your options, trust your gut.
And then just take action.
And see how it feels.
I bet it'll feel pretty good to finally get that off your plate.
It usually does. It's like a weight has been lifted.
Yeah. And if this episode has resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with someone else who might benefit from it.
Yeah, spread the word.
Because sometimes just hearing these ideas from a different perspective can be really helpful.
Absolutely.
All right. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
How might embracing imperfection in your decision-making free up more mental space for you to focus on the things that truly matter?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is. It's all about letting go of that need to control everything.
Yeah, and trusting the process.
So think less, decide more, and keep moving forward.
On to bigger and better things.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.